We've got the new AP poll here, fresh off the presses post Week 8. I'm going to give my quick reaction like I always do to it. Not a lot of changes at the top this week. Georgia, Ohio State, Tennessee remain 1, 2, and 3. Georgia receiving 31 first-place votes coming off their bye. Ohio State getting 18 first-place votes. They beat Iowa 54-10. Tennessee is number 3, getting 13 first-place votes. So still, you know, some discrepancy in who the number 1 team is in the country at this point. I think you can make an argument for all of Georgia, Ohio State, and Tennessee at this point. Again, it just depends what your criteria is. Is it most deserving? Is it best? Is it a combination of those two things? Normally, I like to make it a combination of those two things, and at this point, I'd probably put Tennessee number 1, Ohio State number 2, Georgia number 3, and that's because I just think Tennessee, they've earned it. They've beaten Alabama. We know Alabama's still a really good team, and that doesn't mean I think Tennessee necessarily would beat Ohio State or Georgia on a neutral field, but I think at this point in the season, when you look at the schedules that Georgia and Ohio State have played, let's be honest, guys, the only reason Georgia is being ranked number 1 right now is because of what Oregon is doing. If Oregon had 3 or 4 losses right now, I think Georgia would be number 3 or number 4. But because Georgia blows out Oregon in week 1 and then Oregon goes on this crazy streak, it only elevates Georgia. And it's the only reason they're being ranked number 1. They struggled with Kent State. They struggled with Missouri. They were down by 10 points in the fourth quarter of that game. So, guys, well, factoring everything in, I'd go Tennessee number 1. I think they're the most deserving, and I also think they've proven they're one of the best teams with their performance against Alabama. I think Ohio State is a solid number 2 team. They've blown everyone out, but they haven't gotten a quality win. That's understandable. That's why I'm not putting them at number 1. And then I would go Georgia number 3. They are undefeated, and they did get a dominant win against a very good Oregon team. So those are the top 3. You've got Michigan, number 4. They had a bye week. They will be facing Michigan State at home. That's a 7:30 ABC game, trying to get revenge on Mel Tucker, who is 2-0 against them. Clemson at number 5. Clemson, of course, kind of a weird game against Syracuse. Quarterback controversy. And guys, the thing with Clemson is I came out earlier, and in my Hot Takes video, I said that Clemson has a 0% chance of winning the national title. I 100% stand by that. They've got major quarterback issues. DJ Uiagalelei at this point, he's just an average quarterback. He gets benched because they weren't moving the ball. He threw 2 interceptions. Clemson has 4 turnovers. They don't force any turnovers themselves, but they still win this game because they physically dominated an overmatched Syracuse team at home. They didn't cover the spread, but they got the win. But Clemson, they very well may walk into the playoffs undefeated, but I would be shocked if Clemson defeated an Ohio State, an Alabama, even a Tennessee or a Georgia. I would be shocked. We've got Alabama at number 6. Their defense finally shows up against Mississippi State, completely shuts them down, basically a shutout. I know Mississippi State scored late. Mississippi State was ranked number 24. I'm sure, yeah, they certainly fall off after that. TCU gets another come-from-behind win against Kansas State. They're down, you know, by 11 points at halftime. Kansas State had 4 touchdowns at the half, and then they shut them down in the second half. TCU ends up winning that game by 10 points. Oregon up 2 spots after beating UCLA. No surprise there. They handled UCLA pretty easily at home. They were 7-point favorites and easily covered the spread. Oklahoma State up to number 9 after beating Texas. I mean, listen, I give Oklahoma State credit, but my God, the penalty disparity in that game was just ridiculous. I think it ended up 13-0, 13 total penalties or 14 total penalties for Texas, 0 for Oklahoma State, and that was a very close game with Texas leading throughout most of it. Oklahoma State right now 6-1, TCU 7-0. I just don't see either of those two teams finishing the regular season with under 2 losses. We're wondering that late in the year now, getting there, Can the Big 12 possibly have a team in the college football playoff? I just don't see it. I still believe, even with Oklahoma State having one loss, even with TCU being undefeated, the conference is just going to eat itself. That is my personal opinion on that. UCLA, I believe they're coming off a bye week. They are back inside the top 10 due to other teams losing. Of course, they lost to Utah, then they had the bye week, so they're at number 10 right now. We've also got Wake. I hate how they do this. So we've got a tie at the number 10 spot. Just put someone at number 10 and someone at number 11. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to do this. But they've got Wake Forest also at number 10. And they moved Wake Forest up 3 spots. Wake Forest looked really impressive. Sam Hartman, the 5 passing touchdowns in their win. They easily cover the 20.5-point spread against Boston College at home. Of course, we knew they were going to win, but it was a dominant win. The models, the analytics loved that performance from Wake Forest. UCLA only drops down 3 spots. It was a road loss to a top 10 team, so it's understandable. They really didn't move down that much. Penn State back up 3 spots, getting a huge home win against a Minnesota team that, quite frankly, with the backup quarterback, simply couldn't throw the football at all. So Penn State hosting Ohio State. That's going to be a 2v13 matchup. Number 2 versus number 13 on the road for Ohio State. It's a big noon game. I'm sure Penn State's not too happy about that. Even if you can't get the whiteout, I'm sure they would have settled for like a 3:30 game, but it is big noon. We've got Utah also coming off a bye week. They're going to be playing a very interesting Thursday night game, I believe, at Washington State. I still maintain that Utah, in my opinion, is possibly a top 10 team. I like them a lot. They're number 14. We've got Ole Miss moving down to number 15. A predictable drop. Very funny that LSU is still below Ole Miss after destroying them. I understand LSU has 2 losses. Ole Miss has 1. But kind of a weird dynamic with that LSU-Ole Miss game where Ole Miss was ranked number 7 facing an unranked team, and they were underdogs. And they got crushed on top of it. So LSU still below Ole Miss, but I do understand it's because LSU has 2 losses. But guys, Ole Miss, I said it from that Vanderbilt game. Ole Miss was losing to Vanderbilt. They ran up the score to try and make it look like, they easily won that game. They're a fraud. They were a total fraud from the beginning. I said there's no way they should have been. The only reason they were undefeated, they faced Vanderbilt, they faced Auburn, they faced all these easier teams in the SEC. Their schedule gets a lot more difficult. And, they end up losing here to LSU, who, a decent SEC team, but it's not like LSU is one of the best teams in the SEC, and they got trounced in the second half. They could not stop Jaden Daniels at all. Next, we've got Syracuse up to number 6, down 2 spots to number 16 after their road loss to Clemson. Again, guys, I'm not high on Syracuse right now. I think Syracuse is very fortunate to only lose that game by 6 points, mainly due to turnover luck. That could have easily been a rout if Clemson could hold on to the football. It was a road game, and you look at it's 27-21. Good, Syracuse is competitive, but if you actually look at the context of that game and the turnovers and how that game transpired, Clemson outgained Syracuse significantly. It was a dominant effort. Syracuse had turnover luck, but I will say you're losing to Clemson on the road by 6 points. I understand only dropping them 2 spots. They only have 1 loss. Illinois, coming off their bye week, they're up to number 17. Of course, the biggest factor with Illinois is actually Purdue losing to Wisconsin, which gives them firm control right now of the Big Ten West, looking to go to Indianapolis for the Big Ten Championship. That would be a huge, win for their program. LSU spots in at number 18. They're 6-2. They just got a huge home win. They are gaining momentum right now. That is understandable. Kentucky at number 19. Kind of odd that Kentucky moves from unranked, I believe, to number 19, if I've got that correct. I believe that's the movement they had. They were on a bye week, and they moved from unranked to number 19. I'm not sure I understand that. We've got Cincinnati at number 20. They're up 1 spot. They really controlled that game against SMU. Yes, SMU made it close at the end. They were a 2-point conversion away from tying it. But Cincinnati, they were in total control throughout most of it. I do respect their program. North Carolina at 21. Of course, North Carolina coming off the bye. The biggest question with North Carolina is their defense. We've got Kansas State down 5 spots. They're at 5-2 right now. You lose that game to TCU on the road. There's no shame in it as a Big 12 team, but I think Kansas State is due for a few more losses in that conference. Tulane moves from number 25 to number 23. They beat Memphis 38-28. They were up 35-0 due to some fortunate turnover luck at halftime of that game, and they were able to hold on and cover the 7-point spread. NC State needs to be unranked. They're down 1 spot. Devin Leary is out for the year. They were on a bye week last week, but they should not be ranked. They're going to lose at some point and probably get unranked. And how about South Carolina? For some reason, I thought South Carolina had 3 losses, but they only have 2. They beat A&M at home, and they get a shout out. They are ranked at number 25. Personally, guys, I would have Texas ranked over South Carolina. I understand Texas has 3 losses, but when you actually look at the schedule, you look at some of those losses, they should have beaten Alabama. That was a heavily ref-aided game. Texas Tech was with the backup quarterback, and Texas Tech was 6 of 8 on 4th down, and then this game, the penalties. Listen, I'm not saying Texas is a great team. They have 3 losses, but I would probably still have them ranked, honestly. Liberty getting 35 votes. That's very funny. Liberty coming off a week where they almost lose to an FCS Gardner-Webb team, and then they beat BYU. BYU is a total fraud. Oh, my goodness. BYU, 7-point favorites in that game. Another team I probably would have ranked that the analytics would agree with me, Oregon State out of the Pac-12. They're a very good football team. They've got really good metrics. They received 25 votes. Mississippi State receives 10 votes. I don't know how. Maryland receives 8 votes. They beat Northwestern with their backup quarterback, but they did not cover the 14-point spread. How about Troy getting a shout-out? Very good defense Troy has. They got 3 votes. UTSA, I believe they beat North Texas. They get a vote. Arkansas gets a vote. Arkansas has a horrible defense, especially a run defense. Washington also receiving a vote, and then we've got Florida State, who I actually like Florida State, I guess, more than many of these voters. I don't know if I would have them inside my top 25, but they would be right on the cusp just looking at it overall. So, guys, kind of a little bit more of a tame college, AP poll here to update with not a lot of movement. We've still got the same top 3 teams. In any order, I think there's a clear top 3, and then is Michigan a part of that top 3? It'll be very interesting to see what Penn State does against Ohio State, because that will affect Michigan. If Ohio State blows out Penn State on the road, which I do not think will happen, but if it does happen, that win by Michigan over Penn State at home, it's going to lose significant value. But if Penn State plays Ohio State close or maybe upsets them, Michigan, you're possibly looking at moving inside the top 2. So that is a huge game for Michigan to really see how they measure up with Ohio State. I'll say this, if Ohio State goes out there and beats Penn State by 21, I would move them to number 1 next week if they do that. But guys, that is the latest update, the college AP poll here post week number 8. That's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description.